Welcome back to the Health Marketing Collective, where strong leadership meets marketing excellence. I'm your host, Sara Payne, and I'm bringing you fascinating conversations with some of the industry's top marketing minds. Today, we're talking about the future of creativity in health marketing and why it's time for B2B brands to raise the bar. My guest is Mike Cronin, co-founder and chief strategist at Verve. He's built a career around one clear belief: that creative work should move people, not just fill space. He's led brand and campaign strategy for some of the biggest names in healthcare, including UnitedHealth Group, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Optum. He's also worked with iconic brands like Harley-Davidson and Samuel Adams. Mike brings a creative lens to strategy and a strategic lens to creativity, and he doesn't shy away from telling it like it is. If you've ever struggled with uninspired briefs, safe ideas, or campaigns that just blend into the noise, this episode is going to fire you up. We'll talk about how to unlock emotionally resonant creative work in healthcare, why simplicity is a superpower, and how marketing leaders can build teams that actually want to swing big. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Looking forward
absolutely.
to the conversation. Yeah.
I'm excited to have you here. Let's get right into it. From your perspective, how is creativity evolving in B2B healthcare marketing? What shifts are we seeing?
Well, I think big one is frankly that the marketing can appear anywhere now. So instead of being confined to spaces where we would traditionally see B2B messages happening, they're now being sprinkled in with your social media feed, LinkedIn, of course. It's just appearing everywhere. So that's a vast shift in how we have to think about how we break through with creative. So, how do you compete with consumer brands that are appearing in social feeds, even though your message is a B2B message?
Yeah, great point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great point. Another thing I know you're passionate about is moving beyond the idea that creativity equals flashy campaigns and really seeing it as more and more of a strategic lever. How can we continue to embrace that shift?
Yeah, good point. It tends to be people when they think about creative, it's like you said, people think flashy, it's got to be crazy, some off the wall idea. To be honest, my partner and I at the firm have always felt that creative, there's a lot of room for creative within the confines of very defined parameters. So a lot of people think about creativity as, outside the box, right? Think outside the box. No, I want the box. Give me every defined parameter there is, because there is a ton of room in there to be smart and creative. So we're not we're not just doing it to get attention. We're doing it because, we're in this profession to make things happen for our clients. Um, and if that means we have to stick within some guideline, that's fine by us. We just want to know right up front what that guideline is. So the mistake people are making is thinking it's a wacky idea is what creative is about. No, creative is about actually finding incredibly intelligent ideas that can break through within a very defined box.
And they can still be fun, funny, humorous
Absolutely.
inside of that box if that is strategically the right direction for the brand, for the campaign, whatever the objective is, whatever the right audience is, right? If that is strategically the right direction. So being in the box doesn't mean boring, dull, right? Uninteresting.
Absolutely.
Actually,
No.
I think what you're saying is quite the opposite, is we have to make sure it's strategically anchored first, and that's where the creativity should be focused. And then inside of that, appropriately, we can dial in these elements of, fun at an appropriate level.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like you set up this whole thing with that philosophy that we hold dear, which is you have to move people. So no matter what you're doing, it's about moving them both in their hearts and in their minds. So that's two we view it as a spectrum, right? Like every piece of creative has to do both in some level, whether it's tapping that emotion or whether it's really hitting hard at giving people reasons to believe what it is you're saying. Every piece of creative has to do that. So as long as we're able to move people in that way, tap into emotion, you can do that in different ways. And that's all we're saying is, creative, as long as it's doing that, it's doing its job.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that you've said is we're either trying to make something unforgettable or we're just making noise. And that line really stuck with me. How do you think that idea applies to healthcare marketers, especially in B2B, where it can feel a little risky sometimes to, I'm going to use the word bold, be bold.
Mhm.
This notion of unforgettable obviously can have a lot of different definitions associated with, but what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're making marketing, and the whole point is people need to remember your message, whatever that message is. So that's where that's coming from is, um, why are we doing this if somebody's gonna see your message and then the next minute forget it? So
Yes.
being bold is about breaking through enough, again, that it people not just, don't just see it, but feel it. Um, and I think it's easy for especially, I've seen it in healthcare brands. It's like, let's not let's be blue. Everything's blue. Let's stay within our color palette. And I think that can be right for many brands, but if everyone's blue, then how do you stand out, right?
Right.
Like, can we look for a different approach? And again, much more likely to be remembered if we approach it with, "Oh, you're orange." Um, that's a very simplistic idea, but you get the point.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What are some of the universal human truths that B2B healthcare marketers should be tapping into more, but often miss or are maybe under leveraged?
Oh, that's a big question.
I know. I know.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think it's easy for healthcare to fall into the trap of putting people into defined sort of ideas about who they are.
Mm,
I think recognizing that there is, no matter who we are, whether our ethnicity, our background, our socioeconomic background, we all experience similar issues, right? And so tapping into truths like we're nervous about visiting doctors, or
yes.
we are we may have grown up in where we're afraid to go into a hospital or whatever those truths might be. It makes you as a brand, if you can tap into that, uh, really feel like you get people. Um, and that's our goal, right? We want to feel like we get people. So I think I'm sort of taking us back to this idea of there's so many ways we can parse audiences these days. We can get into such granular detail on who our audiences are and, their journey, where are they at in their journey. Sometimes stepping way back and saying, what is it that we all experience as
Mm,
humans?
yes.
Um, can be a smart way to tap into that emotion. Um, and so that's what we try to do, is look for those sort of very basic things that make us all a part of one another. We feel human because we all experience these things. We like to look for those.
Yeah, I love that about your work and your approach at Verve, having experienced it myself. And I think when I think about this topic, this conversation, I think it tends to be a little easier for the consumer brands,
Yeah.
right? And a little stretchier, a little harder in
Yeah, yeah.
B2B marketing, advertising, insert, right, whatever discipline here. On the B2B side, we tend to maybe not be as closely aligned to some of those human truths, right? We tend to focus on cost savings or faster workflows or efficiency or minimizing burnout for clinicians. Those are all wonderful things, but they are a step away from and not as, strongly, clearly aligned to some of those core human truths, like on the positive side, hope, right? Or
Yeah.
dignity. On the more negative side, fear. You brought up
Yeah.
nervousness, fear. That's a big one. And so I think that's an opportunity from my perspective for B2B brands. To your point, we are competing on all of the same channels with B2C brands. And so we really want to get through the noise on that. We're going to have to be unforgettable, and tapping into those core human truths is absolutely a way to create that resonance and achieve that.
Yeah, totally. And good point. Again, the financial administrator at a local clinic that needs to decide, who they're going to partner with for their whatever it may be. They're human. And so
Absolutely.
again, a cheaper plan or a more uh, a product that helps them with being more productive on their end. You can phrase that, or you can position those products in a way that again taps into that human desire for, like, I don't want to be dealing with all this headaches, right? We're all human. Nobody wants to do paperwork or wherever it might be. So if there's a way we can tap into that piece of their humanity versus just going right to saves time, saves money, you know, how can we put it in a way that really makes them feel like, oh, you get it, you get what I'm going through.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Absolutely. You've certainly worked with a lot of different brands across your career. What do you see as the difference between teams that unlock great creative and those that don't?
Very easy strategy. The teams that, and this is, yes, I'm a strategist, but I grew up in creative, so I get to say this. Creatives and clients who recognize the value of that creative insight, or sorry, the strategic insight, they're the ones that will be able to do um, more creative, quote unquote, work. Because um, once you've aligned around that kernel, that that interesting insight, that way of phrasing the strategic insight, and everyone's behind that, if they see it in the creative work, they're totally comfortable with it. I think the biggest issue, um, why you don't see that many, again, creative or, crazy creative ideas in healthcare tends to be because we approach things very, I don't know, non-strategically. It's like, we need an ad or
Mm,
we need a campaign. Let's go make that thing. Whereas if you just take one step back and say, okay, we know we need that thing. What are we trying to say? What truly is our insight? How are we going to say it in a way that's different, unique to us? Um, as long as teams are committed to the idea that a strategy is important, they can generally do better creative.
Yeah, and you've also said, I love this line too, "Give me the freedom of a tight brief." And and I think it's counterintuitive, right? This idea of freedom coming under a tighter, a narrower focus, but the freedom comes from the clarity and the alignment, right, that the creatives get
Absolutely.
in understanding this is the problem we're solving for over here, right? Now
Yeah.
we have all of this freedom to go creatively, right? All sorts of different
Yeah,
directions inside of that tighter box.
that is exactly right. In fact, been a lot of studies done on the value of having that tight brief. But one that wasn't in advertising that is often pointed to, and I love it. And again, don't quote me on where this came from, but it was an experiment where they let kids free roam in a playground, right? In a just
Mm,
open playground versus giving kids a sandbox and saying, "Go play in the sandbox," versus
mm,
just go to the playground. Again, I don't know the specifics, but I do know that the kids that were given this sandbox to play in were much more imaginative with their play. They made up new things to do.
mhm.
They, had, whereas when they were given this sort of utter freedom of the playground, they kinda got lost. They didn't know quite where to play or where their
Yes.
imaginations could take them. So that's your listeners can look it up, but it is a pretty famous experiment, and I just believe it to be true. It's like you said, the more you know about what the problem is to be solved, the more ways you can think, the more creative ways you can come up with to solve that problem.
Yeah, it's such a relatable example, right? And you're so right because if you have the entire playground, you're gonna spend half the time just testing different things and deciding which thing you wanna be doing, right?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
let alone getting creative, right? And so that clarity really unlocks a tremendous amount of freedom for sure. I wanted to get into some brand examples. Can you share an example of a campaign or a project, um, something that you were involved with, where you were able to do something creatively different or risky? And you don't have to say, who the brand or the client was if you don't want to. But I'm curious, what made it work? Where you were able to do something creatively different or risky.
Yeah. I'll give an example. It's within healthcare, but it's admittedly more consumer focused, but I think it's a good example of using being a little risky and having that stand out. So we were approached by a client who it was Health Partners, which is a local they're like healthcare uh, clinics, multiple clinics and different types of programs, care providers all over the state of Minnesota and around the region. But they also provide health plans. Um,
Yeah.
so they're both sides of the coin. Um, the issue was they had all these clinics that had different names, brands associated with them. And they wanted a campaign that helped bring all those under the umbrella of Health Partners. They had to do it in a uh, very quick way, and they had to figure out a way to do it fairly reasonably priced.
Yeah.
Um, because again, how do you bring, say 10 or 15 different clinics under the same brand? So our idea was a very simple device that appeared at the end of we were doing a television campaign that rolled all these clinic names into and under the healthcare, the Health Partners brand, their logo. It was just a visual device. But the clincher was we needed a hook.
Hmm.
And the hook we landed on was, do you know Lizzo?
Yeah.
The artist Lizzo?
Yes.
She had a song. This is around the time she was starting to blow up, but this is before that happened. She had a song called Good as Hell that
Yep.
was
I know it. Know the lyrics
huge,
well.
popular. Yep, everyone, very pop driven song. And the lyrics were literally good as hell. I feel like feeling good as hell, but it had this energy to it. Um, so the risk was we tapped into that track, set it against moments of human interaction. So a guy trying yoga for the first time, or somebody seeing their newborn baby, or um, a child with uh, cold, like her sister helping her with her Kleenexes, just little human moments with this great track. But again, using the lyrics good as hell for a health plan. But the beauty of it was it all just came together as a unit and fit within their brand aesthetic of good. They were all about doing good. Um, so it was a creative risk, but honestly, to this day, I'm not really sure they knew that the lyric was good as hell because nobody seemed to question it.
I was going to ask you if you got any
Yeah.
pushback.
Yeah, we didn't really get any pushback. So, again, credit to the client on that one as well, because they saw the value in having that hook. But
Yeah, no,
I don't know.
it's a great example, and I remember you're telling this story. You and I didn't talk about this example
Mhm.
before we sat down to record today. I associate that song with that brand. Like, I
Mhm.
hear that coming from the TV, and I know that it's Health Partners.
Yeah.
So just really interesting, for me to have experienced it, as the consumer on the other side. And yeah, what a gift in that instance. You found alignment around something like good, and
Mhm.
more broadly, feeling good worked,
Yeah.
right? It works in healthcare. It worked for the moment.
Yeah.
And not being afraid to lean into that, for risk of a client saying, well, we can't say that word, right? We can't say that word on TV, or we can't, be a brand that's associated with that. But I love that. Mike, you talk a lot about honest pragmatism and how creative people respond to truth, not toxic positivity. I think a lot of marketing leaders need to hear that. Can you say more about how that mindset shows up, or what advice you'd give to CMOs who want to lead with that kind of clarity and empathy?
What I'd say is, again, recognize it's very we're in an environment where often we're sprinkled with BS, right? Like it becomes a part of our daily lives. Whether it's lingo that we all use for shorthand, um, or acronyms or whatever, we fall into those traps because we're just sort of it's the frog in boiling water. Um, Analogy, right? I don't know if you know this, but it's if you put a frog in a pot of water and then turn on the heat, they don't feel the water around them getting warm, and eventually they don't jump out, right?
Yeah.
That's where we're at right now. It feels like we need to recognize that sometimes we are all in this boiling pot of BS.
Mm.
And the more we can just speak to each other as honest people, as human beings, the again, the better we're all gonna be because that's how we relate to people. I've noticed the more we talk about BS in meetings or, cutting through BS, people really respond to that.
Mm.
And I think it's just because whether it's our feeds, our LinkedIn feeds, or the news feeds, people want an escape from it. So my advice to CMOs is tap into that human side and remember that the more real you are with people, um, the more trust you're going to build with them,
Yes.
because they will know if you're trying to BS them. So even if it feels scary, use strong words if you need to. Don't try to cover over um, issues or problems because people know it, whether or not they say it outright, they feel it. And that erodes the trust that they have in you. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's just a strong feeling I have in today's world.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you speaking that truth because I agree with it 100%. I think there is a lot of BS or varnish um, out there, and we need more of the authenticity, more of the saying the quiet part out loud, the hard thing, right, that we
Yeah.
maybe don't want to address. We need to be willing to really go there, and I think, as you've said, audiences will respond very positively to that because the reality is they're living that truth, right? They are living that truth. So why would we try to pretend otherwise? Creating an environment as a brand where we speak those truths, um, I think offers a lot of it's just very I think it's very attractive to people. I think it's a very emotionally resonant.
Yeah. And whether, again, I always go back to whether or not it can be scary to be real, but people, there's an idea of trust that gets eroded when people aren't speaking real with each other.
Yeah.
Even though it might feel safe, it's not safe.
Yeah. Great point.
Yeah,
Great point. Well, before I let you go, I'm gonna hit you with a few quick fire questions. No overthinking any of these, just say what comes to mind.
sure.
So, what's one word that should never be in a creative brief?
Um, blue sky.
Goes back to your earlier point. Love it.
Exactly.
You're consistent. You're nothing if not consistent here, Mike. What's
Yeah.
a healthcare buzzword that you wish would disappear?
Outcomes.
Mm, yeah, I feel that. I feel that.
Mhm.
What's the most creatively inspiring brand outside of healthcare right now?
Um, I'll go with probably the obvious, but Nike right now, especially
Mm,
revisiting their roots.
yeah. Was it them that had the big Super Bowl, ad,
Mhm.
women empowerment that really
Yeah,
got a lot of resonance with the audience? Yeah,
yeah,
that's a good one. They are definitely honing in on those, human truths for sure.
absolutely.
So let's say you personally are stuck on a creative problem. What do you do first?
Oh, um, ChatGPT. No, no,
A moment of levity here.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Let us into
well, I,
your creative process. Where do you what do you do?
um, well, honestly, I have such a tight and strong relationship with my partner in our business that I call him. And so I have a relationship a trusted relationship that I can tap into, and that's what I'll generally do.
Awesome. We should give him a shout out, Rob Burnham.
Yeah, Rob Burnham. Yeah.
Last question. What's one thing that kills a good idea faster than anything else?
What I would say is overthink. So you've seen the phenomenon, you've experienced this, I'm sure, when you've been presenting an idea and the first thing that happens is the CMO says, "Oh, I don't want to talk. I want to hear what everyone else has to say." And what that does is everyone else feels now like they have to say something because the CMO has now put them on the spot. And generally speaking, they're going to find something, a flaw, before they start talking about what they like. So, not that there's never anything wrong with the creative work that gets presented, but
I know what you're saying, though. It's leading with the closed mindset versus the yes and, right? It's the old
yes,
improv
yeah,
analogy. Like, okay, we're pitching creative ideas, and they could be very conceptual at this point and actually go in several different directions. We
yeah,
need to say, what I love about this is, and yes,
yeah,
and that, versus thinking of all the possible ways that this could go sideways or doesn't work for the brand.
yeah,
So I feel that one for sure, and you're right. I am familiar with that phenomenon.
yeah,
So you're
yeah.
saying you would prefer that the CMO speaks first?
I would absolutely, if they want to. Now, but I will go back to, okay, I'm going back to the BS thing because it's kind of BS. Everyone knows that it's gonna come back around to the CMO
It's
anyway.
ultimately their decision. Yeah.
Right. So, it's a little bit of that BS factor, um, that comes out, but, to your point, absolutely, like, this isn't about there's no flaws. It's about how can we find the right before we find the wrong, because there
Yes.
may be ways to, position or change a campaign that are very easy, that get around all the flaws. If it's right enough, we can get over the wrongs.
I love that. That's such a great place to end. Thanks so much for doing this with me, Mike. How can our listeners get in touch with you?
Well, our website is madewithverve.com, and they can always reach right out to me at my email, mike@madewithverve.com.
Love it. Thank you again for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And if you enjoy the show today, folks, do us a favor and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for being part of the Health Marketing Collective, where strong leadership meets marketing excellence, because the future of healthcare depends on it. We'll see you next time.